I'm calling to order the Library Board of Trustees meeting for December 18th, 2023. First item on the, or second item on the agenda, I guess, is any additions or changes to the agenda? Anybody have anything? Wow, that was beautiful. Moving on, we have public comment and or board training.
Oh, and that should have gone down below with the F introduction, so we can just let Sam go.
Okay,
I think
perfect.
that somehow got put on the wrong way, and then that would be my fault since I was the one that updated it for you. So there you go.
So do you want to just wait for her and we'll
Yeah,
keep
so
going
we'll
down?
wait for
Okay.
them to finish up.
All right.
Go on to item 3, and then we'll be ready for you next after that.
So
Let's do the minutes.
yeah. So to approval of the minutes of November. Do I hear a motion?
I make a motion that we approve November's minutes.
A second?
I will second.
Perfect. It is approved.
All right. So now is when
Now we get to.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me this evening. I'm going to try to honor our time by setting an alarm for 15 minutes because I'll be honest, friends, I've not been fun at parties for like the last 2 years because this is all I've actually talked about. And I will go on as long as you will let me. I am Sam Helmick. I'm the It's all good. I'm the Community Access Services Coordinator for the Iowa City Public Library, and I sit on the Iowa Library Association's board with Jenny Garner as your president for the Iowa Library Association. I also sit on the executive board for the American Library Association, and as of January 1st, we'll be running for president. So it is lovely to get to come into my communities where I serve and collaborate with you all and get to talk about what I love so much. And I don't know if I lived up to the great title that we came up with for the Public Libraries of Johnson County's legislative reception, but I'm going to try to talk to you about how literacy is really liberating and how we empower our communities through free libraries. So I always think it's great to borrow the words, as we say in the biz, borrow from others that inspire us. And Macaulay's quote kind of sits in my office and lives with me every single day of the week. I think the public library system is one of the most amazing American institutions, free for everybody. If you ever get the blues about the status of American culture, and show of hands, I promise not to look, anybody ever get the blues about the status of American culture? There are still more public libraries than there are McDonald's. During the worst of the Depression, not one public library closed their doors. That's an incredible legacy, right? That we follow. But Iowa actually also has a couple of our own independent legacies that I love to just brag about. One of the first ones being that we are the founders of the Library Bill of Rights. In 1938, Director Forrest Spalding, he was the director of the Des Moines Public Library, had to do some self-examination with his board. They were not allowing German immigrants into the doors of their library. They wouldn't allow them to use their meeting rooms. They were between world wars, and they felt that their reasons were valid. They wouldn't permit Mein Kampf onto the shelves of their public library. And it started to occur to him that perhaps we would have been more prepared as a nation had we not only lived our values, but also understood the words of those that oppose us just categorically. And so he penned the Library Bill of Rights, and it was adopted nationally by the American Library Association at their conference the following year, and it is now the international standard for free people reading freely. That's an incredible torch for us to carry, and I'm very proud to work in a state that has that legacy. But then additionally, we have more public libraries per capita than any other in the nation. That means that some of us are operating out of the closets in the back of the city hall, and some of us are as large as North Liberty, and then there are even larger systems like Des Moines out there, but we all serve as the center, the heart of our community. We're all doing the same work, regardless of the resources that are poured into it, right? But then we also use our federal dollars, the Institute for Museum and Library Services dollars, right, to go through the state library and say, let's have this program called Open Access. Let's borrow from each other. Let's make sure that our return on investment is as high as possible. And robustly, we can get a North Liberty Library card, an Iowa City Library card, a Burlington Library card, a Fort Madison Library card, and I can borrow from all of them and return to all of them. Don't tell Jenny, but sometimes I drop those Iowa City Public Library books in your drop, and then you all nicely just ship them down for me through this wonderful program called Iowa Shares. So I appreciate it, Jenny. That's really nice of you, Jenny. But then it's also entrepreneurial and economic development. I can't tell you how many meeting rooms I have used in public libraries for free across the nation when I was editing my books, when I was teaching on the side. It's just wonderful that I can walk into a public space that's clean, that has electricity and Wi-Fi, and I don't even have to buy a caramel macchiato. That's just bonus. And they'll let me use the amenities. And I think it's important to impress upon our stakeholders and our leaders in the communities that we serve that for every dollar invested in Iowa public libraries, you get a $5 return on investment, right? So we might not be a revenue creating department in our city, but we definitely create value. And then there's also just the social welfare of it. Are you one of the libraries that is floating a social worker or looking at that program?
We work with the interns, social work interns. We've been doing that
Through
for
the
about
University
5
of
years.
Iowa?
6 years, 7
Right.
years.
You're vanguarding something that we're starting to see across the nation because we understand that we are going to see more people than any other city department combined every single day, right? I think like on average at the Iowa City Public Library, about 115 people come through the doors. And that means that all of their needs and their crises and their trauma are going to come with them. And as we continually lose those buckets in Iowa to support them, whether it's transportation to them or funding to even provide them, libraries are picking up that slack. A couple of examples of this in my lifetime have been when the Iowa workforce department started to close around the state. And so they slapped some software onto the public library computers, didn't resource us really anymore or train us and said, here you are. You are now the community's job search facility. And we stepped up to the plate. Additionally, when there were Department of Transportation centers closing around the state, they threw kiosks into our libraries and said, here you go. We're going to use that outlet. You don't even get to choose. We're not going to give you any traditional training when folks are annoyed with you because their photo doesn't look the way they want to have it look. Good luck scripting that and getting yourself out of that. And we became support for the Department of Transportation. And in fact, I think that our citizens came to rely upon that. I think about voter suppression and access and just having an ID in a rural community and how it's so tied to employment and citizen engagement and just navigating society. And libraries stepped up to that plate, right? Sadly, libraries have not been consulted about removing those kiosks, and we're starting to feel the effects of that. So look at them. 5 minutes in, I'm only on
Libraries
slide
are
2. This
awesome.
isn't good for us, folks.
Some libraries also have post offices
Oh, they do have post
in
office.
their libraries.
Wow.
I know.
Do you? Because I could be bringing my Iowa City books and my mail.
We have mailed things for people, but we do not provide the postage.
I think that was dangerous information to tell me, Jenny. I think and then I had the honor of representing the public libraries of Johnson County. I grew up in the Burlington Public Library System. That was my home library. And we didn't collaborate with our county. We were pretty much it with Mediapolis. So it's really been wonderful to see all of you come together as respective boards and directors and board presidents and enable each other to offer those social services, to be information hubs, to offer educational support, to negotiate early literacy programs as that's been funded and defunded over the last several decades. But then I also like the fact that if you only have a North Liberty Library card, you actually have a library card to the world. That you all will borrow from different libraries around the world on behalf of the North Liberty Public Library for a patron. The farthest thing I think that was ever borrowed for me was from New Zealand, and it's weird to hold a book that's been farther in the world than I have. And I just think it's amazing that you all invest in these services and make sure that they take shape. And it's just important to understand that there are different types of literacies. I love to think that I'm domesticated because I'll get like a Betty Crocker box and it will still let me put the egg inside. And so I'm like, I'm baking. This is great. And there are numbers. It says 350 and I turn the dial. And I am learning some skills, right? I've invested $6 into a box of Betty Crocker brownies. I have a dozen eggs. And I'm learning skills. And I love the fact that that can be translated to a tween program with mug cakes. I love the fact that that can be translated to an English as a second language community, like conversation hub over that brownies that I made, if they're edible, we'll see. I just love the fact that we have kids who are using power tools and kids who are using Minecraft and senior citizens who are coming in and teaching us how to macrame. And this is a space where it's free, it's comfortable, but we also are thought partnering together. I can't think of any other organic place in society that takes shape, right? I actually got into libraries because as a volunteer, we were doing the summer reading program and it was a bug theme. Have I ever told you about this, Jenny? And so I was a volunteer, but they mistook me for staff because they were like 6, this little kid. And they're like, Miss Sam, if you'll hold the spider, I'll pet it. And I'm like, what? Yeah, spiders are not bugs. I want a formal protest. Spiders are awful and don't belong in any public library. And I remember this moment where this little person and me were both going to, with a 30-year span of life experience, overcome a fear together. And I was thinking that was the moment I fell in love with libraries, because that can't happen anywhere else organically, where two strangers just sort of connect and decide, yeah, I'm going to hold this creepy hairy thing and you're going to pet it with one of your fingers. Like, I have to commit my entire palm to this endeavor and it can crawl up my arm. But yeah, we're both brave today with your little index finger petting. Yeah, sure. But it's important for you to know how these things take shape. So as board members, I'm sure you're more aware than like the city council members and some of the stakeholders that we spoke to a couple weeks ago, because you do this work. But there's federal funding, there's municipal funding, there's tax funding, but then there are things like our levies that are the most pure form of taxation and representation, right? You have to put on a petition that says, I would like to dedicate funds, I'd like to put my money where my mouth is, to a great library facility and services in my community. And then you have to successfully get it on the ballot from that petition and then pass it, right? And 97 libraries did that around the state of Iowa. With House File 718, those were dismantled overnight. The monies are still being collected. However, they are no longer officially allocated to the libraries that they were intended for. They go into the general fund, which means that 97 library directors have got to get weird this year and say, listen, I know you're within a rock and a hard place here, but if you don't give us those dollars, that's less staff, that's fewer hours, that's closed days, that's no more new books. But it's also me having to tell the public that you chose not to give those dollars back. But we're not working with villains at the city level. It's not their fault they've been put in this position. And in fact, I would not want to be in the shoes of people who have to choose between days a library is open and maybe a few extra dollars now for new streets. And unfortunately, they can't even like wash their hands of it and say, we're just going to change this. We're going to officially give this money to you going forward, because that would be tying the hands of future city councils, which I guess is against the law. So it's going to get weird for a little bit, folks. So not only are we doing all of this good work, but we also have to ensure that we resource this good work. And so I think it's important to understand that we're fighting a two-front war. And I brought up the money one first because I think that's the hidden war. We're in a class war. We're a publicly funded institution, and there are entities, overt and subvert, that could make a lot of money in privatizing and in commercialing this up. So please know that I care about books on shelves. I care about specific titles. I care about book bans. But I also understand that it's classic misdirection for the class war. The culture war right now is taking shape in Iowa schools. And what I mean by that is Senate File 496, which we talked about the lawsuits just a little bit a couple weeks ago. But essentially, it's also a war on trust, right? Every single one of you have your fingerprints in your library. And respectively, caregivers and parents can too in their school libraries. There are processes, there are policies in place. You can walk in, it's a publicly funded library, and you can see what's in the collection. You can talk to the curriculum developers, and you can have fingerprints in the process of your child's education. In fact, I don't know if you're going to clutch your pearls, because a lot of librarians do when I say this. Grieving your government is also a First Amendment right. So a book reconsideration, you coming up and saying, don't like these Jane Pattersons, I'm prepared for that because it's your First Amendment right. We have policies and procedures in place. I've been waiting for you the whole time. I'm not upset that you're questioning me. That's your right as a citizen. Same process takes shape in schools. And so I remember hopping around as intellectual freedom chair, because that's what I was before president, and listening and supporting and just watching democracy take shape in the Johnson County School District, in Pella, at the public side, and just watching community work, which is very human and messy. And you'd have students come up and say, I like these books because they represent me. And you'd have caregivers and parents get up and they'd say, I like these books because I helped pick them out. I actually gave up work time, lunch hours, after work, to come in with the curriculum developers and make sure that The Hate You Give would be on the shelves because it told my stories. And they retained them. Democracy worked in that way, right? It didn't restrict them. It didn't remove them. It chose to retain them. And now we're abdicating our trust to a higher power. It's not only a trust in each other to do this good work, but it's also a responsibility to do this good work. Like, I don't think it's my place to tell Burlington readers, it wasn't when I worked there, but especially isn't now, what to read. Um, Similarly, I really wouldn't appreciate them trying to tell me what to read. And so this abdication of trust to a state power um, will hurt us in a couple of ways. The first one being that we have a supermajority, and it doesn't really matter what side that supermajority is on. They will make decisions that go one way. And that's not healthy for society. Secondly, if you're not engaged in the good work of libraries, then you're probably going to use them less often. And the best way to advocate for your library is to use it, right? So that you understand the process is taking shape and you are getting the best investment on your resources as a member of that community. And so I guess another quote that kind of lives in my head, I wish I had great words. I have to rely on them from others, which is really helpful because I work in a library. So many doors are closed to those who cannot read. Everyone in the world has the right to happiness, and with that comes the right to read. Once you learn to read, you will be forever free. And I think read is a very broad word. And by read, I mean, on some level, I had to apply some literacies to get my oven at 350 and bake those brownies, right? I was reading the words on the page, but I also kind of had to use other skills like measurement and, frankly, patience and memory to get that in the pan and get it, music. There's a lot of muscle memory even when you're reading the actual music. Reading and thinking are so intrinsically connected that it's really hard to separate them from each other. And so I think the danger that we have in not only defunding libraries, but also allowing them to become the battlegrounds for a culture war is that we're going to not teach our students and our Iowans to read robustly, but we're also teaching them what to think, not how to think, right? If there are only brownie box mixes on the shelf at Hy-Vee, that's the only thing I get to bake. Even my engagement with it will say 15 minutes up. Will even just kind of die out, right? I'm not going to bake brownies every single week of my life, which means that the odds of me becoming a good baker dwindle more and more as we speak. I hope that analogy gets us there, folks. But
You still got time.
I still got time. So I think it is important to really examine this. Today, I handed out Chilton manuals to a 17-year-old who just got his grandpa's car. And I'm really desperately like, this is so, like, you're going to think we're stalkers, and I promise I'm probably just a weird librarian. But I love when you come back and you tell me your stories. I love when you tell me the success stories. I can't wait for this kid to come back and be like major upset that it's not working out, but that he's going to keep at it. And then I'm like, I hope that like by prom you got this car going and there's like this whole like 1980s montage of you like underneath this. And I need to know. I just need to know that there's a place in the world where you can get mechanical literacy and social literacy and cultural literacy and agricultural literacy. We got a planner outside of our library, and right now we're building a taco garden. So all the ingredients will go to tacos eventually. And like Chicken Little, I will help them eat the tacos, but somebody else is doing the agricultural literacy for us right now. Because these are human rights. These are absolute and profound human rights, and the furtherance of our society depends on them all. So right now, Iowa Library Association has its hands full. I've got my sleeves rolled up because we have the second most library adverse bills in the nation, y'all. We tied second place for Missouri, and I'm going to let President Otto keep the gold belt because I just don't have time to wrestle for that. And we're right behind Texas because Texas is like, it's just larger than life. Everything's bigger in Texas. And we understand that more is to come. The DeSantis playbook is essentially what we are seeing here in Iowa. And what I mean by that is first it's school libraries, and then it's public, and then it's academic. And it's still kind of that baseline of abdicating trust. We don't trust ourselves as parents and caregivers to do this good work in the school frame with our boards and our teachers and our teacher librarians, so we abdicate it to a higher power. Then we stop trusting our library board of trustees, and we pit them against each other. The Pella situation, for example, where they wanted the city council to essentially assume your role. And it took them 18 months and I think 32 votes to keep the library board of trustees intact. It's going to come at a statewide level. It's going to try to be created as legislation, because why fight miniature battles town by town by town when you can simply hit a city council and a library board of trustees against each other? And it might even be attractive to some libraries, right? Because if you're operating in a closet in the back of City Hall and it's hard to fill the roster and make quorum, maybe it makes sense initially to hand off this very complex work to a council. But I'm very grateful that you dedicate your time and attention to it because it is complex. And I don't think a city council could give the bandwidth and the knowledge that you all give to it. I'm not sure a city council can support, like in Iowa City, the climate action department, the human rights and equity department, streets, and a library. I just don't see how they're going to do that in an efficient and robust manner. So I wanted to warn you that it's coming. And if you really do like doing this, I imagine that might be questioned in the next 12 months. So our legislative priorities will continue to push autonomy and access to all. We're trying to remind the legislature that we are an economic developer, despite the fact that we are not a revenue-generating arm of municipal government. But then again, that despite the fact that the state library was taken out of the Department of Ed this year with the reorg bill, literacy, libraries, and education kind of do go hand in hand. And at the end of the day, that even though the culture war for me in this moment in time is secondary to the class war, intellectual freedom is essential for any of it to go forward. So I'm asking you to go on a date with me and not to swipe right. I'm asking you to meet me at the Capitol on March 5th from 1 to 3. I'd love to absolutely fill that state house with folks who are doing the good work, folks who they'll listen to because you were leaders in your community, and remind them that we have that legacy, We have that legacy to uphold when it comes to intellectual freedom. I like to think about us in pop culture. I think two of my examples that come to the top of my mind are The Music Man. Did anybody ever watch The Music Man? Did you know that there's actually like a Music Man museum in Iowa? They have 76 trombones on the ceiling.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And I think about how the librarian let you check out Balzac. Oh my goodness, And then I think of Field of Dreams. And I guess it's also about baseball, but my favorite scene was when they were all going at it in the gymnasium about intellectual freedom, right? And just thinking about the fact that this is a visceral value for us. But I think that if we can show up on March 5th and if we can keep showing up on election nights, so thank you, because I noticed that Iowans did for us this year. Thank you. We will see ourselves out of this. It's not like the pendulum hasn't swung this way before. It is part of a pluralistic society. And I have hope because you all just gave me 25 minutes of your night. And so busy people, stakeholders in the community care about this topic. We're going to be okay, but we're going to have to do it together. And I thank you. I can take questions or I can just be shepherd hooked right out of the room, whatever you'd like.
Any questions for Sam?
So,
Thank you for giving me time. Yeah, I'm gonna be pushy though. I'm doing intellectual freedom interviews. I'm doing like a podcast series, and I'm trying to get folks who actually are connected
Thank you.
to this work
Thank you.
in a way that I never will be. I'd love to interview you. Yeah, so I'm gonna use it
like
for
to
my
be
Public
interviewed?
Library
Look
Association.
how cool that is.
All right.
That's really.
Do I just sit quietly in the back now, Jenny, and text, or what would you like
Yep,
me to
You
do?
can just sit quietly in the
All
back.
right. Or I can go just return some library books.
Hang on to your seat while we do this exciting board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, you ready for me?
Yeah, let's just head to reports.
All right, so budget. We are sitting really well, actually, in the budget. So 42% would be average for this time of year. We're at about 37% for the total budget. Obviously, we do see some areas as normal that are a little bit over or under that kind of level out as the months go on. And then I would just, moving on, I'll just kind of talk a little bit about the FY25 budget. I worked really hard to keep a fairly flat budget this year because we know that down the pike, as Sam talked about a little bit, and that cities are getting hit pretty hard with legislation and other things that are causing some budget challenges. And Ryan has been pretty open about this, so we were pretty careful to keep that ball low. And we just had our budget meeting last week, and it went really well. They didn't ask me to cut anything more, so that's the good news. We just won't see a lot of increase, but we know that we have a lot of extra bandwidth thanks to our city slate programming that we do with the rest of the city. the community relations department raised a lot of funds and support for that also benefit us in our programming. So that is budget. Shall I just travel on? Does anyone have questions about budget and budget stuff? Okay. So just a staffing update. We had a minute where we had a full staff team, and then we had one of our lovely part-timers who was able to get a more hours at another job that she works, and so she has given her notice. She was kind enough to give us 3 weeks, so we had the whole month of December to kind of figure out those things. What we're going to do is fill Corey's role as Corey stepped into full-time. Corey Braze, who is our adult services assistant librarian, will step into full-time work in January, which was approved last year for this budget year, halfway through. We have those 29 hours to give. So we've been negotiating those waters with City Hall and the city administration. So we did offer that position to Morgan Simpson, who is a current employee at the city, and they accepted that position. So we are feeling really comfortable with that. Morgan was an LA1, a library assistant 1. And then we're working through how we're going to fill. We have 40 hours for library assistant 2 positions. So we're going to fill those extra hours, probably between 2 different staff. We're still kind of figuring out what that's going to look like. Just staff, what we're finding is a lot of the part-timers have to have a second job to make ends meet. And so we have to try to work around other hours, and sometimes that can be challenging. So we're working on the more bodies we have, the more scheduling flexibility we have. So that's kind of what we're working through right now. And then the next thing I had on my radar was that the January board meeting does fall on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which is a holiday for us. That means we don't have coverage with the community relations department because they're off, and also the library staff is off. So wondering if you would all be all right with moving that meeting to January 22nd.
That works for me.
No
Yeah,
problem with
that
me.
works, yeah.
Okay.
Well, especially since we don't have one in February either, so.
Correct. So it doesn't squish them together too much. That's what I was
We're
hoping.
not doing a meeting in February, is that right?
We don't have a meeting in February because it falls on Martin Luther King, on President's Day.
Oh, of course.
So
Yep.
we might
Yep.
find this to be an ongoing sort of a challenge. We'll see.
Yeah, we did talk about that last year.
Yeah,
That's right.
so we may have to just kind of look at moving that permanently in the future. We might want to just kind of make that a deal that we just have it
Yeah.
the next week. Going forward, would that be something you guys want to just approve tonight?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think
Yeah.
you could vote on it, but I don't know that it needs a vote. It's just
No,
I would say
I'm
that's
sure
fine.
just an
Yeah.
operational thing. Okay. So if we could just plan on shifting that meeting going forward in January to the week after Martin Luther King Day, then we don't have to go through this discussion every year. The next thing that I wanted to bring up, and I kind of brought it up last time, but we wanted to have a quorum, which we don't. I mean, we do have a quorum tonight, but Lindsay's gone. Lindsay was able to be in on that discussion last time. And we had talked about it early on this year, was just discontinuing that statement of concern form that we reworked. And rather than having a general comment form, as other city departments have and other governmental agencies have. Kind of my thinking is I've been meeting with someone at the national level named Peter Bromberg, who's part of every library. In fact, Sam and I just had a meeting with the executive director of every library right before this meeting, talking about this exact thing. And that the idea is that there's no other actually entities that say, well, we don't like your chairs. We're gonna have a form that you can fill out to complain about your chairs, or that's just one example. But we're not gonna have, like, if we had someone come in and say, I'm a vegan and I don't think you should have any cookbooks in your collection that allow for carnivores or meat eaters, we're not going to even consider that, right? So the idea is that they fill out a form. They can fill out a form, a concern about anything they want, or it could be a compliment. So thinking a general form that's just a form to fill out to raise their issue, whether it's a compliment or a concern, and then we can address it in a meaningful way, which would be just them talking to me, basically. And then if they wanted to elevate that, certainly they could consider elevating that. But to have an actual process for people to complain about the books on the shelves kind of doesn't make sense.
The one thing I do like about it though is that it's the way that it has been written and kind of tailored was one specific material.
Yes.
Where when you open up to a general
Form.
comment form, you're saying, "Lay it on me," and here
Mhm.
comes your list of 500 books.
So we could that's why I wanted to bring it back to the group to
Yeah.
hear those types of things.
That's just my
mean,
first thought.
I'm
not
not-
saying that I'm against switching to
Right.
that, but that's the first thing that comes to my head.
Yeah. I don't know. And Sam, I don't know if you'd be willing to speak to it, but Iowa City does not have a farm, and in fact has
you've brought
never
that
had a
up.
farm.
Well, we consider circulation to be that process, and we have the highest circulating library in the state. The real estate of our shelves is pretty high, right? And so, and they keep printing new books every year. So, if we make space for those, then we can only really remove the ones that aren't circulating. And if they're not circulating, the people have spoken. And if they are circulating, the people have spoken. So, yeah.
So I think it's more the idea that it would be just that they don't get to specify what titles we have on the shelves. We have this expertise in place. So
Right.
they can say they don't like them, but we're not going to reconsider materials, basically,
Right.
is what it says. And how theirs
So, I mean,
is,
we have a collection development librarian. That's
Yes.
their job. That's,
and that is what
yeah.
they've been trained to
Yeah.
do. And we have people working who've been trained to do that work. So it's more to the point that we just don't have a reconsideration process.
Yeah.
It would be the collection development would just state that because we follow the tenets of intellectual freedom and ALA and ARSL's statements. We don't feel the need to have a reconsideration policy, and we're not going to reconsider materials. Basically, I would want to work through that a little bit more. I just kind of wanted to bring it up and see what you guys thought. And then we can work and address it through the collection development if we decided we wanted to look at that more thoroughly.
Great.
If you're comfortable with it, then I can bring that up bring something to you for next meeting to kind of review and think about. And I'll do a little more legwork on it too. Okay, excellent. Oh, my thing closed here. All right. So meeting room software, I think I mentioned it last time that it's discontinuing. Nick Shimon, who is our adult services librarian and is really, really has a great IT background, also willingly took on I don't know if he willingly did it, but he did it. Took on reviewing some other softwares and making some recommendations, did a great spreadsheet with cost analysis and analysis of the versatility of the different softwares and what they would do for us. We identified local hop as the likely replacement, and in fact have now kind of moved forward with that. So it's actually less expensive than our current software, so we're saving a little money, and actually has more ability to do what we need it to do. So we'll be hoping to have that switch over start in January or February, because the other group would want us to continue to pay an additional amount to keep them for another 8 months until they're gone. So we're hoping to just have it all in place so that we don't have to even mess with it. And they already have the information to transition over at local ops, so we should be good to go. And then community and programs update, I don't even know what happened there. The only one that I really have is just the excitement of the Taylor Swift event that we had the other night with 250 children. That was, and Scott can attest, so they talked about where they wanted to do that. It was a 2-week turnaround. They had this great idea. They're like, we want to do this thing. And they started planning. And then they came and asked me if they could shift some meetings around in meeting rooms. And I was like, sure, because I didn't know what was happening. And then they didn't tell me, and I didn't ask. And then they came back, and I was saying that they were worried about the numbers. And I was like, okay, tell me what's going on. And then we talked it through, and I was like, let's do this. Let's have the activities in the teen lounge and just let it be a free for all on the library floor for one night. It's one night. People can adjust for one night. And that's what they did. And Scott, was it a free for all?
It was a free for all. It was great. It was wonderful.
That's cool. I was not. It was quite the turnout. So they're planning an additional one next year. And in fact, what I love the best is we have a new guy that comes in the mornings, a retiree who comes in, and he's got lots of great ideas for us. And his latest idea that he told Jen was that we should have Frank Sinatra a birthday party as well. And then we looked it up, and Frank Sinatra's birthday is the day before Taylor Swift's. So I totally told them they should play on this next year and do like a Taylor versus Sinatra type deal, or something
gosh.
Swift versus
Fun.
Swift and Sinatra combined. I don't know, but I'm really into it. And I think the staff is looking at me like I'm insane, but I think we
love
could
it.
do both. I think it would be super fun to do like a big band night and then a Taylor Swift night.
Did you guys take pictures?
Oh, yes, they will be
I
coming
can't
out.
wait.
You'll see them next month in the updates. We had our legislative reception, which Laura was able to attend on November 30th. Jamie was supposed to be there and then texted that day and said, I wasn't thinking that I had surgery today and I probably can't drive because it was eye surgery. So they are fine, but they did not make it. So we did have 24 people there, though, and Sam gave a similar show to what they gave you all tonight. And we had 4 local legislators in the room, which was fantastic. 2 of our new legislators, and then several city leaders. And so we were really, that was the best turnout we've had in a while. It's the first time we've had it in North Liberty since 2014. So I was very excited to have it, that event. And then I did just want to update you that I did submit my resignation to the Iowa Library Association board based on just a couple different things, one being time and some other things that I'm looking at doing in the next year, and the other being just some differences of opinion about how that board was operating. Nothing to do with our esteemed president, by the way, and they know this because they were the first person that I talked to. I will still be highly involved in ILA, and I did express that I would to the people on that board in different route. And Sam kindly invited me to be on the Governmental Affairs Committee, GAC committee, which Sam chairs. So that's great. So the focus is going to be on advocacy, even more strongly on advocacy over this next year. And I'll still be part of the leadership committee, which we're doing our big leadership. It's every other year. Our big leadership institute is this year, so I'll be heavily involved in that in 2024. And that is all I have today, except for just the staff reports, which you'll see the staff has been as busy as usual. Did anyone have any questions about the staff reports? All right. So moving on to the policies. Policy review, which is the library access for sex offenders against minors, and then the form that we have them fill out. And as I mentioned, this is really just sort of a chance for you guys to hone in on it and take a look if there was anything that caught your eye that we could probably wouldn't make a lot of changes unless we brought them to our city attorney to discuss. Did anyone
I didn't see anything that jumped out on
in
it.
them that jumped out? Okay. So I think it's really just an approval for another year on that one, on those 2 documents. And do we want to just keep going and do all 3 of them at once?
Yeah, might as well just hammer through them.
Okay. So collection development, we actually was on the agenda for last month, or I'm sorry, conduct policy was on the agenda for last month. And there were just a couple questions. Brady brought up a great point about the wording in one of the points on that. I lost my spot here. Let me go back. Okay. So it is in under illegal activities, basically, and it has to do with Iowa code about viewing pornography in public spaces, exhibiting it for minors, basically, is what the code is. So how to word that was the question, and the way we had worded it, Brady, after you and I talked, I kind of pulled your wording together, and there was a question about how that was worded, so I updated that to what you see here, which is exhibiting or viewing obscene materials that could be observed by a minor. That was that update, and then the only other. And then we removed, I think I talked to you guys last time, I removed the hygiene and body odor question or from as a nuisance out of there. And just instead any behavior that could endanger the health and safety of others rather than that. So those are really the only updates, but the main one was about the observing obscene materials where a minor could view it. And as long as those look good, I think we're set.
Okay. They all look good to me. You guys, motion to approve them, I guess, if we want to do that, or do we just want to send them through?
You have to go through the
Yeah,
motions.
I'll make a
Okay.
motion to approve both policies. It's just the two policies, right?
Yep.
Yeah, both policies.
I'll second that.
Perfect. It's approved.
Yeah, I think you have to take a vote.
Yeah.
Do I have to?
Just an aye.
I don't.
Aye.
I'm just kidding. Let's take a vote here. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? No horses are here to say nay. So it's approved.
And then I would just point out the great pictures in the. There were so many good pictures that it was really hard to decide what to put in my report for the board or the city council this month. So I just added a bunch of them, and they're super cool. We had so many good programs in November. There will probably be more November pictures next month, just because there were so many cool ones. And then Taylor, of course. And we did have one young human ask if Taylor would be there for the event.
well, that's adorable.
And I was like, oh,
So sad at the same time.
I don't think there's any place in the whole city that would hold Taylor Swift. But it was great.
Yeah.
So
Very
that is all
valid.
that I have tonight.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any old business to bring up? Any old business? Perfect. Any new business? All right. Then I will adjourn the meeting.
I'll make a motion to.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Look at that.
All in
I'm
favor? Aye.
gone for a month and I lose my
See, I was
mind.
gone for 2 months. I was having itchy.
Oh.
What am I trying to say? Motion finger here.
All right. It's adjourned.
Excellent. Look at that.